Asymmetric algorithms utilize a pair of keys for both encryption and decryption. And these keys are generated together by one host. Another host that is going to be communicating securely with the other will also generate his own public and private key pair. The common method of implementation is where a party will share their public key and they will keep the private key in secret. The private key cannot be calculated from the public key. So it is secure. Now, in terms of how the encryption functions, let's take a look. So encryption as a process is going to function the way that it normally would. We have some clear text data. We're going to encrypt it using an encryption key. We're going to send the ciphertext, and then we're going to decrypt it using a decryption key. So that's the process. Well, how does this work when we're using asymmetric key encryption? Well, let's take a look at the example of Alice and Bob. Alice and Bob want to talk to each other. Both of them are going to generate a public and a private key. Once they've generated their own public and private keys, they'll exchange public keys across the network or in some other fashion. This just has to be done prior to encryption happening. Okay, so now Alice wants to send some traffic over to Bob and wants it to be encrypted. So that clear text method is going to be encrypted using Bob's public key. That encrypted message is then sent across where Bob will decrypt it using his private key. The result will be the clear text message. Bob can then reply back to Alice by encrypting using Alice's public key, and then Alice can decrypt using her private key. Now, when you consider that Alice could have used her private key to encrypt, let's think about that. If a party exchanges public keys, then Bob may not be the only one who has the public key of Alice. So if Alice were to encrypt a clear text message and send it to Bob with him as the only intended receiver, and she uses her private key, anybody who holds that public key can decrypt the message. So this wouldn't necessarily be the best way to do things. What that would allow, though, is for Bob to authenticate that a message came from Alice, because the public key from Alice is the only thing that could decrypt something that was encrypted with her private key. So under the typical functionality, we're going to encrypt traffic with our public key of the peer that we want to send traffic to. That peer will then decrypt with their private key. Now, as far as algorithms go, one of the most common algorithms is the RSA algorithm. That stands for Ravish, Shamir, and Adelman. That was developed back in 1977, and it was patented for some time. As of 2000, that patent expired, and now it is public domain, so it is used in many implementations. There are others. There's DSA, LGML, and there's also the elliptical curve algorithms. But RSA is by far the most widely used. It has a variable key length that ranges from 1024 to 4096. Now, when you look at that, you might think, well, our symmetric keys were 40 bits to 256 bits. These must be way stronger. Well, the algorithms are different, so we really can't compare the two together. However, the same concept that we discussed with symmetric algorithms would be true here. 1024-bit would be less secure than a 4096-bit key. Now, when we use a symmetric algorithm, we generally will rotate the keys at least every single day, if not more often than that. RSA is considered a long-term algorithm or a long-term key, and in most cases that's not renewed for many months, sometimes a year or more. These asymmetric algorithms are much slower than symmetric algorithms, and so therefore they're not often used for real-time traffic, but for data at rest or for encrypting signatures, this would be the way to go. One other example of an encryption method that uses public and private key pairs is PGP. Now, PGP stands for Pretty Good Privacy, and this is used for email encryption. The way that this works is both parties are going to have a public and private key pair. They're going to share their public keys with one another. Then when they send an email to the other, they're going to encrypt it twice. The first time is going to be with their private key. The second time is going to be with their public key of the receiving device. They're going to send it over to the receiving device. Receiving device is going to reverse that process. It's going to use its own private key to decrypt first, and then it's going to use the sender's public key to decrypt the second time. Now, by doing this, it provides me that encryption that we need as well as authentication of the sender.